The rain came down in sheets, cold and merciless against Tempest's skin as she stumbled through the undergrowth. Each step sent sharp pains radiating through her swollen ankles, and her hand instinctively moved to cradle the small swell of her belly, the only thing that mattered anymore, the only thing she had left. Behind her, somewhere in the darkness, lay the Crescent Valley Pack territory, her former home. The place where Marcus had looked at her with such disgust when she'd told him about the baby, his face twisting into something ugly and unrecognizable. "It's not mine," he'd said, his voice cold enough to freeze her blood. "I don't know who you've been with, Tempest, but that bastard isn't my heir." The memory sent a fresh wave of anguish through her chest, stealing what little breath she had left. The baby was his. Of course it was his. She'd never been with anyone else, had saved herself for her mate, had believed in the sacred bond between them. But Marcus had rejected her in front of the entire pack, had called her a whore and a liar, and the pack elders had done nothing. They'd simply watched as he'd cast her out, pregnant and alone, into the wilderness. Thunder rolled overhead, and Tempest's foot caught on a root. She went down hard, her palms scraping against rough bark and wet leaves. For a moment she simply lay there, feeling the rain pound against her back, wondering if it would be easier to just stay down, to let the forest claim her, to stop fighting against the exhaustion that pulled at her like quicksand. But then the baby moved, a soft flutter against her palm, and Tempest felt something fierce and primal surge through her. No, she would not give up. Not when this innocent life depended on her, not when she was all this child had. She pushed herself up onto trembling legs and kept moving forward, though she no longer knew where forward led. The storm had disoriented her hours ago, and the forest had grown dense and wild. Somewhere in the back of her pain-fogged mind, she registered that the trees here were different, older, thicker, with roots that seemed to writhe across the ground like serpents. The air itself felt heavier, charged with a power that made her wolf whimper and press close to the surface of her consciousness. "You shouldn't be here," her wolf whispered, anxious and afraid. Tempest knew that voice was right. She'd heard the stories, same as every wolf in the Northern Territories. These woods marked the border of the Alpha King's domain, the most feared territory in all the realm. Brennan, they called him, though most wolves spoke his name in hushed whispers. The King of Wolves, the ruthless one, he who showed no mercy to trespassers. But where else could she go? Marcus's pack stretched to the east and south. To the west lay the mountains, impassable in her condition. And behind her, she couldn't go back. She'd rather face the Alpha King's wrath than return to the place that had cast her out like garbage. Another contraction rippled through her belly. Not the kind that signaled labor, but the cramping that came from too much stress and not enough food. She'd barely eaten in 3 days, afraid to stop long enough to hunt, knowing Marcus might send someone after her despite his rejection. Rejected mates had no rights, no protection. She was fair game now, a rogue wolf with no pack to claim her. The world tilted suddenly, and Tempest realized she was falling again. This time, her body hit something harder than earth. Stone, maybe, or the thick root of one of the ancient trees. Pain exploded through her shoulder and hip, and she heard herself cry out, the sound swallowed immediately by the howling wind. "Get up," she told herself desperately. "Get up, keep moving. For the baby, for—" But her body wouldn't obey. The exhaustion was too complete, the pain too overwhelming. She felt consciousness slipping away from her like water through cupped hands, and with it went her last shreds of hope. "I'm sorry," she thought, her hands still pressed protectively over her belly. "I'm so sorry, little one. I tried." The darkness rose up to claim her, and Tempest let it come. Brennan stood at the window of his study, watching the storm rage against the fortress walls. Something felt wrong tonight. Had felt wrong for hours now. A restlessness that crawled beneath his skin like insects. His wolf paced anxiously in his mind, whining and scratching, demanding he shift and run. "You've been staring at that window for 20 minutes," Rowan said from behind him, his beta's voice carefully neutral. "What's out there?" "I don't know," Brennan admitted, his fingers tightening on the window frame. "But something is." He'd learned long ago to trust these instincts. They'd kept him alive through assassination attempts, betrayals, and the brutal power struggles that had marked his rise to the throne. When his wolf grew this agitated, there was always a reason. "I'm going out," he said abruptly, turning from the window. Rowan's eyebrows rose. "In this storm?" "Brennan, it's the middle of the—" "I'm going out," Brennan repeated, his voice dropping into the alpha command that made even his oldest friend straighten instinctively. Alone. He didn't wait for a response, simply strode from the study and down through the winding corridors of his fortress. Guards snapped to attention as he passed, but he ignored them, his mind focused entirely on the pull he felt, the inexplicable need to be out in the storm, searching for something. The rain hit him like a physical blow the moment he stepped outside, soaking through his shirt in seconds. Brennan welcomed it, welcomed the cold shock that sharpened his senses. He closed his eyes and let his wolf rise closer to the surface, borrowing its heightened perception. There, to the east, near the border markers, something that smelled like fear and pain, and his eyes snapped open. Without conscious thought, he was running, his body moving with inhuman speed through the darkness. The forest blurred around him as he followed that scent, his heart pounding with an urgency he didn't understand and didn't question. He found her collapsed at the base of one of the ancient oaks, her body so still he thought for a terrible moment that he was too late. But then he caught the faint flutter of her heartbeat, and beneath it, impossibly, wonderfully, the rapid rhythm of a second, smaller heart. Brennan dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her rain-soaked form. She was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair plastered to pale skin and clothes that hung in tatters. Her hand was curved protectively over her belly, even in unconsciousness, and he saw the slight swell there that spoke of pregnancy. But it was her scent that made him freeze, made his wolf suddenly surge forward with a force that nearly tore a shift from him right there in the mud. "Mate!" his wolf snarled, possessive and fierce. Mate! It wasn't possible. Brennan was 32 years old and had long since given up hope of finding his true mate. He'd assumed the moon goddess had decided he didn't deserve one, not after the things he'd done to secure his throne. And yet the bond was there, singing through his veins like lightning, calling to something deep and primal in his soul. She was also clearly pregnant with another man's child, he noted with a strange detachment. That should have mattered. Should have made him hesitate. It didn't. Moving with infinite care, Brennan gathered her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, too thin for a pregnant she-wolf, and rage flared hot in his chest at whoever had let her get to this state. The baby's heartbeat was strong, at least. That was something. "I've got you," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. "I've got you now. You're safe." The run back to the fortress took only minutes at his speed, and he bellowed for the healers before he'd even reached the main doors. Staff scattered in all directions, and within seconds he was striding through the castle with a dozen people trailing behind him, all asking questions he ignored. He took her to his private chambers, his own rooms, not the guest quarters. Some distant part of his mind recognized this was highly irregular, but he couldn't bring himself to care. His wolf wouldn't tolerate having her anywhere else, wouldn't rest until she was somewhere he could guard her properly. The healers descended the moment he laid her on his bed, checking her pulse, examining her belly, murmuring in low voices about dehydration and exhaustion. Brennan forced himself to step back, to give them room to work, though every instinct screamed at him to push them away and tend to her himself. "She'll live," the head healer, Marta, said after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. "The baby, too, thank the goddess. But it was close, Your Majesty. Another hour in that storm." She shook her head. "She's been through trauma recently. The body shows signs of sustained stress and malnourishment." Someone hurt her, Brennan said flatly. It wasn't a question. I would say someone neglected her, at minimum. A pregnant Omega needs proper care and feeding. She's received neither. Marta's expression was disapproving, as only the elderly healer could manage with him. I'll have broth sent up when she wakes, and she'll need to stay on bed rest for at least a week. She'll have whatever she needs, Brennan said. Leave us. Marta's eyes widened slightly. He rarely dismissed anyone from his own chambers, but she was wise enough not to argue. She simply gathered her assistants and withdrew, closing the door softly behind them. Alone with his unconscious mate, Brennan finally allowed himself to move closer. He pulled a chair to the bedside and sat, studying her face in the soft lamplight. She was beautiful, he realized, beneath the exhaustion and grime. Delicate features with high cheekbones and a stubborn chin. Dark lashes fanned against pale cheeks. His hand moved of its own accord to brush a damp strand of hair from her forehead, and the moment his skin touched hers, the mate bond flared so bright it stole his breath. His wolf howled in recognition and triumph. How was this possible? And why now, when she was clearly already mated to someone else, already carrying another man's child? Except, Brennan's eyes narrowed as he studied her neck, searching for a mating mark. There was nothing there. No scar, no bite, no evidence that she'd been properly claimed. His wolf perked up at that observation, suddenly hopeful. Rejected, he realized with certainty. She'd been rejected by her mate. That was the only explanation for how she'd ended up pregnant and alone at his border, half dead from exposure. Some fool had thrown away his mate, had abandoned her and his own child. The rage that thought kindled in Brennan's chest was dark and terrible. He wanted to find whoever had done this and tear him apart with his bare hands, wanted to make him suffer for every moment of fear and pain this woman had endured. The violence of the urge should have alarmed him. He'd worked hard over the years to control his more savage impulses. But where she was concerned, he found he didn't care about control. She was his mate. The goddess had given her to him, had sent her to his border, to his territory. And the child she carried, innocent in all of this, deserved better than to be cast aside because of its father's rejection. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Brennan at age 8, watching his own father look at him with disappointment and disdain. "You'll never be strong enough to lead," his father had said. "You were a mistake." He'd spent his entire life proving that assessment wrong, had clawed his way to power through strength and ruthlessness. But he'd never forgotten that feeling. The crushing weight of being unwanted by the person who should have loved you most. This child would never feel that way. He would make certain of it. The woman on the bed stirred slightly, and Brennan leaned forward, watching as her eyes slowly flickered open. They were amber, he saw, the color of honey in sunlight, and for a moment they were unfocused, confused. Then they landed on him, and Brennan felt the mate bond snap fully into place with a force that nearly knocked him from his chair. From the way her eyes widened, she felt it too. That instant, undeniable recognition that transcended logic or reason. "You're awake," he said softly, fighting to keep his voice gentle when his wolf was roaring at him to claim her, mark her, make her his in every way possible. "You're safe now. You're in my castle." She stared at him for a long moment, and he watched the play of emotions across her face, confusion, fear, wonder, and underneath it all, a bone-deep exhaustion that made his chest ache. You're the Alpha King," she whispered, her voice hoarse from exposure and disuse. "I am. My name is Brennan." He kept his posture relaxed, non-threatening, even as every muscle in his body was coiled tight as a spring. "What's your name?" "Tempest." She swallowed hard, her hand moving instinctively to her belly in a protective gesture that made his wolf whine. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to trespass. I was just trying to. I had nowhere else to." "Don't apologize," he interrupted gently. "You did nothing wrong." She looked at him like she didn't believe that, her amber eyes shadowed with pain too deep for someone so young. He wanted to demand answers, wanted to know who had hurt her and how he could make them pay. But she was trembling now, clearly terrified despite his attempts to seem harmless. And then she said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Are you going to kill me?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "No," he said fiercely, putting every ounce of conviction he possessed into that single word. "No, Tempest. I'm going to protect you." Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception, for the trap she clearly expected. He let her look, kept his expression open and honest. The mate bond hummed between them, growing stronger with every passing second, and he wondered if she knew what it meant, if she understood that the moon goddess had just given them both a second chance. Finally, slowly, some of the tension bled from her shoulders. "I don't understand," she admitted. "Why would you help me? I'm nobody. I'm just—" Her voice cracked. "I'm carrying another man's child." "I know," Brennan said calmly. Then, before he could second-guess himself, before logic could override instinct, "And I'm going to claim that child as my own." Tempest's mouth fell open, her eyes going wide with shock. "What?" He stood, suddenly needing to move, to channel the intensity of what he was feeling into action. "Tomorrow, I'll convene my council and make a formal declaration. You and your child will have my protection, my name, and my throne." He turned back to face her, holding her stunned gaze. "You feel it, don't you? The bond between us?" She went very still. Then, slowly, she nodded. "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes," Brennan said. "You're my mate, Tempest. And that makes your child mine to protect and claim, if you'll have me." He watched her process his words, saw the disbelief war with desperate hope in her expression. She was silent for so long he thought she might refuse, might tell him she wanted nothing to do with another mate after what she'd been through. But then she whispered, "Why? Why would you do this?" "Because," he said simply, "everyone deserves to be chosen, especially you, especially your child." He moved closer, dropping to one knee beside the bed so they were eye level. "I won't force this on you. If you want to leave once you're recovered, I'll provide safe passage wherever you wish to go. But if you stay—" He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "If you stay, I swear to you that you'll never face rejection again. You'll never be alone, or afraid, or unwanted. That's my promise to you, mate." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and Brennan felt each one like a knife to his chest. Without thinking, he reached up and gently wiped them away with his thumb, the simple touch sending electricity racing through his veins. "I don't even know you," she said, but there was no conviction in it, just wonder. "Then let me prove myself to you," he replied. "Let me show you what having a true mate means." She was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes locked on his. Then, so softly he almost didn't hear it, she said, "Okay." The single word unleashed something powerful in Brennan's chest. Relief and triumph and fierce protectiveness all tangled together. His wolf howled its approval, already considering her his in every way that mattered. "Rest now," he said gently, reluctantly releasing her hand and standing. "We can talk more in the morning. You're safe here, Tempest. I give you my word." She nodded, her eyes already drifting closed with exhaustion. Brennan watched her slip back into sleep, saw the way her breathing evened out and her hand remained curved protectively over her belly. Tomorrow he would make it official. Tomorrow he would declare before his council that he was claiming this woman and her unborn child. There would be questions, objections, possibly even challenges to his decision. He didn't care. For the first time in years, Brennan felt certain he was doing exactly what he was meant to do. The moon goddess had sent this woman to him for a reason, had given him a mate when he'd stopped believing he deserved one. He would not waste this gift. He would prove himself worthy of her trust, would show her that not all men were like the fool who had rejected her, and he would love her child as his own, because that's what fathers did. That's what he'd always wished his own father had done for him. As he finally left his chambers to give Tempest privacy to rest, Brennan found Rowan waiting in the corridor, his expression curious and concerned. "Well?" his beta asked. "What was so urgent you had to run into a storm?" Brennan smiled, a real smile, not the cold expression he usually wore. "I found my mate." Rowan's jaw dropped. "You... what?" "Convene the council for tomorrow morning," Brennan ordered, his voice taking on the authority of the Alpha King once more. "I have an announcement to make." He strode away before Rowan could ask more questions, his mind already planning the declaration he would make. There would be complications ahead. He could feel it. But for the first time in a very long time, Brennan felt something other than the weight of his crown. He felt hope. The morning sun filtered through silk curtains, casting golden patterns across unfamiliar walls. Tempest woke slowly, her body heavy with a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep hadn't quite erased. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back like a wave. The storm, the collapse, the Alpha King's piercing eyes, an impossible promise. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, relief flooding through her when she felt the subtle flutter of life beneath her palm. Still there, still safe. A soft knock at the door made her tense. "Come in," she called, her voice hoarse. A young woman entered carrying a tray laden with food, more food than Tempest had seen in weeks. She had warm brown eyes and a gentle smile that didn't quite mask her curiosity. "Good morning, Luna. I'm Lydia, assigned to attend you. His Majesty ordered breakfast sent up the moment you woke." "I'm not..." Tempest started to correct the title, then stopped. What was she, exactly? "Thank you." Lydia set the tray across her lap, and the smell of fresh bread and honey made Tempest's stomach clench with desperate hunger. She forced herself to eat slowly despite her body's demands, aware of Lydia bustling around the room, laying out clean clothes, stoking the fire. "His Majesty has asked that you rest today," Lydia said, "but he hopes you'll join him for dinner tonight if you're feeling well enough." Tempest's throat tightened. The Alpha King, Brennan, wanted to dine with her. The man who'd declared he would claim her child as his own, who'd looked at her with such intensity she'd felt it in her bones. The man the mate bond sang for every time she thought of him. I'll be there," she managed. The day passed in a strange blur. Marta came to check on her, pronouncing both her and the baby stable, but insisting on continued rest. Tempest spent hours staring out the window at the vast territory below, trying to understand how her life had changed so completely in a single night. Every instinct screamed that this was too good to be true, that Brennan would change his mind, would see her as the burden Marcus had claimed she was, that she'd wake up cast out again, only this time with nowhere left to run. But when evening came and Lydia helped her into a simple but beautiful dress that accommodated her growing belly, when she was led to a private dining room where Brennan waited, the look on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. Tempest. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "You look beautiful. How are you feeling?" "Better," she admitted, hyper-aware of him as he pulled out her chair. His hand brushed her shoulder, and electricity sparked through her at the contact. "Thank you for everything." They ate in careful conversation, Brennan asking gentle questions about her preferences, her comfort, never pushing when she hesitated. But Tempest felt the weight of unspoken things between them, questions about her past, about Marcus, about how she'd ended up at his border. "I meant what I said last night," Brennan said finally, his dark eyes holding hers. "About claiming your child. About protecting you both. I know you have no reason to trust me yet, but I intend to prove myself worthy of that trust." "Why?" The word burst from her before she could stop it. "Why would you do this? You're the Alpha King. You could have anyone. Why take on someone else's..." Her voice cracked. "Someone else's unwanted..." "Stop." His hand covered hers on the table, warm and solid. That child is not unwanted, not anymore, and neither are you. Tears stung her eyes. She wanted desperately to believe him, but Marcus had made promises too, had sworn to love her forever. Look how that had ended. Brennan seemed to sense her thoughts. I'm not him, he said quietly. Whoever hurt you, whoever made you believe you were anything less than precious. I'm not him, Tempest. She nodded, not trusting her voice. But when he asked if she'd like to take some air in his private gardens, she agreed, needing to move, to breathe, to escape the intensity of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. The gardens were beautiful in the moonlight, carefully tended paths winding between flower beds and ancient trees. Brennan walked beside her, matching his stride to her slower pace, one hand hovering near her elbow as if afraid she might fall. These gardens were my mother's, he said softly. She died when I was young, but I've kept them exactly as she designed them. They're beautiful, Tempest murmured, trailing her fingers over silky rose petals. She had wonderful taste. She did. There was old pain in his voice. She would have liked you, I think. She always said the strongest wolves were the ones who survived impossible things. Tempest glanced at him, finding his gaze already on her. You don't know anything about me. I know you walked through a storm while pregnant rather than stay somewhere you weren't safe. I know you collapsed from exhaustion, but still had your hand protecting your child. I know you're terrified right now, but you came to dinner anyway because you're brave enough to give this a chance. His expression softened. That tells me everything I need to know. The sincerity in his words cracked something inside her. Before she could think better of it, she found herself speaking. He rejected me in front of everyone. Marcus, my mate, my former mate. The title tasted bitter. He said the baby wasn't his, that I'd been unfaithful. But I would never. I know. Brennan's voice was fierce. I consent that you're carrying his child, Tempest. Any wolf with half a nose could tell. He lied to cast you out. But why? If he didn't want me, he could have just. Because some men are cowards who destroy what they're too weak to cherish. Rage flickered in Brennan's eyes before he controlled it. He doesn't deserve you. He never did. They'd stopped walking, facing each other on the moonlit path. Tempest's heart hammered against her ribs as Brennan reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his palm. I will never reject you, he said, each word a vow. I will never cast you aside. I will never make you doubt your worth. That's my promise, mate. The mate bond flared between them, golden and warm, and Tempest felt herself swaying toward him like a flower toward the sun. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm so scared of trusting again. I know, but I'm patient. His thumb brushed her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I'll wait as long as you need. But Tempest found she didn't want to wait. Despite her fear, despite every self-protective instinct, she wanted this, wanted him, the man who'd saved her life, who spoke of her child with such reverence, who looked at her like she was something precious. She rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, Brennan went still with surprise. Then he made a sound low in his throat and kissed her back, his arms coming around her with exquisite care, mindful of her condition. The kiss was tender and restrained, full of leashed passion and promises of more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Brennan rested his forehead against hers. Tempest, he murmured, her name a reverent sound. I'm still scared, she admitted. But I want to try. I want to believe this is real. It's real, he assured her. I swear to you, this is real. The weeks that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Brennan insisted on taking breakfast with Tempest each morning before his duties called him away. He'd sit across from her and ask about her night, her comfort, if the baby had moved. His attention was complete and focused, as if nothing in his kingdom mattered more than her well-being. And every evening, he came to her suite and spoke to her unborn child. The first time, Tempest had been bewildered when Brennan knelt beside where she sat and placed his palm gently on her belly. "Hello, little one," he'd murmured. "I'm Brennan. I'm going to be your father, if you'll have me. I promise I'll protect you and your mother with everything I have. You're already so loved." Tempest had burst into tears, hormones and emotion overwhelming her. But as the ritual continued night after night, as Brennan spoke to her child with such tenderness and conviction, something inside her began to heal. This was what a father should be, what a mate should be. "The baby moved," she gasped one evening, grabbing Brennan's hand and pressing it to where she'd felt the flutter. "There. Did you feel it?" Brennan's face transformed with wonder as the tiny kick came again, stronger. "I felt it," he breathed. "I felt them." When he looked up at her, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Thank you for letting me." "Thank you for wanting to," she whispered back. But even as trust grew between them, even as Tempest felt her walls crumbling under the steady assault of Brennan's care, a part of her remained terrified, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to realize she wasn't worth this effort. Lydia became a friend as well as an attendant, chatting with Tempest during the long afternoons, telling her stories about the castle and Brennan's court. "He's different with you," she confided one day. "Softer. I've served the king for 3 years, and I've never seen him smile like he does when he talks about you." The words warmed something cold inside Tempest's chest. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. Maybe she could have the family she'd always dreamed of. Then Marcus arrived at the gates. Tempest was in the great hall when Rowan burst in, his expression grim. "Your Majesty, we have a situation." Brennan straightened from where he'd been showing Tempest a tapestry, instantly all alpha king. "What is it?" "Marcus of Crescent Valley is at our gates. He's demanding to speak with you. He's brought representatives from the Silver Fang Pack." The blood drained from Tempest's face. "No, not here. Not now." Brennan's hand found hers, squeezing reassuringly, even as his jaw hardened. "Silver Fang? What business does that rabble have with Crescent Valley?" "According to their emissary, they've formed an alliance." Rowan's eyes flicked to Tempest. "Marcus is claiming rights to his mate, an unborn child." "I rejected her!" Marcus's voice rang through the hall as guards escorted him in. He looked exactly as Tempest remembered, handsome and cold, his lip curled in familiar disdain. His eyes found her and narrowed. "There you are. I've come to take back what's mine." Tempest felt frozen, transported back to that awful night when he'd called her a whore in front of the pack. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, protective and afraid. "You rejected her," Brennan said, his voice deadly calm as he stepped between Marcus and Tempest. "That severs all bonds, all claims. You have no rights here." "She's carrying my heir," Marcus snarled. The prophecy speaks of a child who will unite the kingdoms," a new voice interrupted. A tall man in silver fang colors stepped forward, his smile sharp. "Surely you've heard it, Alpha King, a child born of betrayal, claimed by the true king. My pack has interests in ensuring that prophecy is fulfilled correctly." "Constantine," Brennan's voice dropped into a growl, "the Silver Fang pack has no business in my territory." "We have business anywhere there's power to be gained," Constantine replied smoothly. "And prophecies have a way of becoming self-fulfilling, don't they? Especially when the mother of the prophesied child is so vulnerable." It happened so fast, Tempest barely registered the movement. One moment she was standing behind Brennan. The next, a figure lunged from the shadows, a blade flashing toward her belly. Brennan moved like lightning, catching the assassin's wrist and twisting until bone cracked. The knife clattered to the floor as the attacker screamed. In one fluid motion, Brennan ripped the man's throat out with his bare hand, letting the body drop. The hall erupted into chaos. Guards surrounded Tempest, weapons drawn. Brennan stood over the corpse, his eyes blazing gold with his wolf's fury, blood dripping from his fingers. You dare! He snarled at Marcus and Constantine, his alpha command rolling through the hall like thunder. You dare bring an assassin into my home! You dare threaten my mate and my child! Your child? Marcus laughed bitterly. That bastard is mine, no matter what claim you try to make. Not anymore. Brennan's voice was absolute. Guards, arrest these men. They've committed an act of war. You can't, Marcus shouted as hands grabbed him. I have rights. The child is mine. Brennan turned to Tempest, his expression softening despite the violence still crackling around him. If you'll have it, we'll complete the mate bond tonight, publicly, legally, in a way that leaves no doubt that you and this child are under my protection. Tempest's mind reeled. A public bonding ceremony, the ultimate declaration, and the ultimate commitment. Once completed, breaking a mate bond was nearly impossible. She'd be bound to Brennan completely. But as she looked at him, at the man who'd just killed to protect her, who spoke to her unborn child every night, who'd never once made her feel like a burden, the answer was easy. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll bond with you. The declaration seemed to drain the fight from Marcus. His face twisted with something that might have been regret or rage. Tempest couldn't tell any more. You've just declared war, he spat at Brennan. Silver Fang won't let this stand. Then let them come, Brennan replied coldly. I've faced worse than Constantine and his pack of cowards. Anyone who threatens my family will learn why I'm called the Alpha King. As Marcus and Constantine were dragged away, still shouting threats, Brennan turned to Tempest and gathered her gently into his arms. She was shaking, shock setting in now that the immediate danger had passed. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you or our child. Our child. The words made her throat tight with emotion. I was so scared, she whispered. When I saw that knife. I know. I'm sorry you had to see that violence. He pulled back to look at her, his thumb wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. But I meant what I said. We'll complete the bond tonight. Make it official. Then no one can question my claim or your status. What if... She swallowed hard. What if I'm not ready? What if I'm too broken to be a good mate to you? You're not broken, Brennan said fiercely. You're a survivor, and I don't need you to be ready for everything. I just need you to trust me enough to try. Tempest thought of the past weeks, of quiet breakfasts and moonlit gardens, of gentle hands on her belly, and promises whispered to her unborn child, of a man who'd shown her more genuine care in a few weeks than Marcus had in months. I trust you, she said, and realized with a start that she meant it. The bonding ceremony took place that night in the castle's ceremonial chamber. Despite the short notice, every important member of Brennan's court attended, bearing witness as Tempest stood before the Alpha King in a simple white dress that accommodated her growing belly. The ceremony was ancient, binding, more magic than tradition. When Brennan took her hand and spoke the words that would tie their souls together, Tempest felt the mate bond flare brilliant gold between them. When his teeth sank gently into her neck, marking her as his, pleasure and power rushed through her in equal measure. And when it was done, when she bore his mark and he bore hers, Brennan kissed her before the assembled court with a tenderness that made her tears fall freely. My mate, he murmured against her lips. My family. For the first time since Marcus's rejection, Tempest allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have a happy ending after all. But in the back of her mind, Constantine's words echoed. Prophecies have a way of becoming self-fulfilling, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The cabin was hidden deep in the mountains, accessible only by a narrow path that Brennan navigated with the ease of long familiarity. After the chaos of the bonding ceremony and the continued threats from Silver Fang, he'd insisted on bringing Tempest somewhere safe, somewhere no one else knew about. This was my father's hunting cabin, he explained as he helped her down from the horse, his hand steady on her waist. After he died, I claimed it as my own. No one comes here but me. The cabin was rustic but comfortable, with a large fireplace and furs spread across a wide bed. Tempest moved to the window, looking out at the star-strewn sky, feeling the baby flutter inside her. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I come here when I need to remember who I am beneath the crown," Brennan admitted, moving to stand behind her. His hand settled gently on her shoulders. "I wanted to bring you somewhere we could just be. Without the court, without the threats, just us." Tempest leaned back against his chest, feeling safe in a way she hadn't since before Marcus's rejection. "Thank you for everything." "I know I haven't been easy." "Stop." Brennan turned her to face him. "You don't need to thank me for treating you the way you deserve. And you've been nothing but brave." His hand cupped her face. "I'm honored to be your mate." The words still felt strange, fragile with newness, but it also felt right in a way her bond with Marcus never had. "I should tell you," she said quietly, "about Marcus, about what really happened." "Only if you're ready," Brennan said. "I won't push." But Tempest found she needed to say it, needed him to know the whole truth. So she told him everything, about how Marcus had been sweet during their courtship but controlling after they mated, how he'd grown angry when she'd gotten pregnant, claiming it would make her weak, how he'd accused her of infidelity despite knowing the child was his, using it as an excuse to cast her out when really he'd just grown tired of her. "He said I wasn't good enough to bear an alpha's child," she whispered, the old wound still raw. "That I was weak and worthless and no one would ever want damaged goods." Brennan's eyes blazed with fury. He was wrong. About all of it. "You're not weak. You're the strongest person I've ever met. And you're not damaged. You're perfect. I'm not—" "You are to me." He pulled her close, careful of her belly between them. "And that child you're carrying? They're perfect too. Because they're yours. Because they're ours now." The possessive certainty in his voice made something warm bloom in Tempest's chest. "Tell me about you," she said. "About your past. I feel like I've been so focused on my own pain, I haven't asked about yours." Brennan was quiet for a long moment, then he led her to sit by the fire, pulling her against his side. "My father was Alpha King before me," he began slowly. "But he wasn't a good man. He was cruel, especially to those he perceived as weak. My mother was his mate, but he treated her terribly. When she died, when I was 10, part of me was relieved she was finally free of him." Tempest's heart ached for the boy he'd been. "My father had a brother who wanted the throne," Brennan continued. "When I was 16, that uncle orchestrated an assassination attempt. My father died, along with most of my family. Only I survived, and only because I was away at a training camp." His voice went hard. "I came home to find nearly everyone I loved dead, betrayed by someone we'd trusted." "Brennan," she breathed, taking his hand. "I hunted down everyone involved," he said flatly. "I challenged my uncle for the crown and killed him in front of the whole pack. I was 16 years old and covered in my family's blood, and I swore I would never be weak enough to let betrayal destroy me again." He looked at her, his eyes haunted. "That's why I became the man I am. Ruthless, feared, unable to trust. Until now," Tempest whispered. "Until you." He brought her hand to his lips. "The mate bond. It's not something I can control or guard against. It just is. And for the first time since I was 16, I find I don't want to be guarded. Not with you." The vulnerability in his admission broke something open in Tempest. Here was the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in all the kingdoms, letting her see beneath his armor, trusting her with his pain the way she'd trusted him with hers. "I'm glad the moon goddess gave you to me," she said softly. "Even though I was terrified at first, even though I didn't think I could ever trust another mate. I'm glad it's you." Brennan's answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "So am I." He kissed her then, and this kiss was different from the one in the garden, deeper, more urgent. When he lifted her carefully and carried her to the bed, Tempest went willingly, her fear finally giving way to desire. They made love slowly, reverently, Brennan's hands worshipping every inch of her skin, while murmuring how beautiful she was, how perfect, how much he wanted her. When he finally joined their bodies, Tempest felt the mate bond flare so bright it stole her breath, tying them together in a way that went beyond physical. Afterward, as they lay tangled together beneath the furs, Brennan's hand rested on her belly. The baby kicked, strong and active, and he went very still. "Did you feel that?" Tempest asked. "Yes." His voice was thick with emotion. When she looked at him, she saw tears tracking down his face. "They're so strong, so alive." "Hey." She touched his face gently. "What is it?" "I just—" He swallowed hard. "I never thought I'd have this. A family. A mate who looks at me like I'm more than just the king. A child to protect and raise and love." The tears fell faster. "I know they're not mine biologically, but Tempest, I swear to you—" "I know," she interrupted gently. "You're already their father in every way that matters. Biology doesn't change that." Brennan pressed his face against her belly, his shoulders shaking. "I love them so much already," he whispered. "I love you both so much." Tempest ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling freely. "We love you too." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other beneath the stars, finally allowing themselves to believe that they deserved this happiness. That maybe, just maybe, they could build the family neither of them had thought possible. The message came 3 days later, delivered by one of Brennan's scouts, who'd tracked them to the cabin. Tempest saw Brennan's expression darken as he read it, saw the fury and fear flash across his face before he controlled it. "What is it?" she asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "Silver Fang." His voice was tight. "They've made a move. Against us? Against someone you know." He looked up at her, and the pity in his eyes made her heart stop. "Tempest, they've taken your sister." The world tilted. "What?" "No. Sage died when I was 15. Marcus told me she died in a rogue attack." He lied. Brennan handed her the message. "Silver Fang has been holding her prisoner for 3 years. And now they're offering a trade. Her life for yours." Tempest stared at the words, unable to process them. Sage was alive. Her baby sister, who she'd mourned for years, was alive, and suffering because of Tempest. "It's a trap," Brennan said firmly. "They want to draw you out. We'll find another way to rescue her." "There is no other way." Tempest stood, her mind racing. "If we send forces, they'll kill her before we arrive. The only way to save her is for me to go." "Absolutely not." Brennan moved to block her path. "Tempest, I won't let you walk into a trap. She's my sister!" The words burst from her, anguished. "She's alive, Brennan. After all these years, she's alive and she needs me." "And you need to think about our child," he countered, "about the baby you're carrying, about the prophecy that makes you both targets. I am thinking about them." Tempest's hand pressed to her belly. "What kind of mother would I be if I let my sister die when I could save her? What kind of person?" "The kind who stays alive to raise her child," Brennan said desperately. "Please, we'll find another way." But Tempest could see in his eyes that he knew as well as she did. There was no other way. Not one that would save Sage. "I have to go," she said quietly. "Then I'm coming with you. They'll kill her if you do. The message says I come alone or she dies." Tempest reached up to touch his face, memorizing the feel of him. "I have to do this." "No." Brennan's arms came around her, holding her tight. "No, I won't lose you. Not when I just found you. You won't lose me." She pulled back to look at him, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "I'll be careful. I'll stay long enough for you to track me then." "Tempest. Please." His voice broke on her name. Don't ask me to let you do this. Don't ask me to send my mate into danger. But they both knew she'd already made up her mind. Because as much as she loved Brennan, as much as she wanted the life they were building, she couldn't abandon her sister. Not when there was a chance to save her. That night, after Brennan had finally fallen into exhausted sleep, Tempest slipped from the bed. She dressed quietly, moving with the stealth her wolf provided, and left a note on the pillow where she'd lain. "I'm sorry. I love you. Come find me." Then she walked out into the darkness, following the directions from the message, going to trade her life for her sister's. Behind her, she felt the mate bond stretching thin, felt Brennan's distress even in sleep as he sensed her moving away. Part of her wanted to run back, to forget Sage and stay safe in Brennan's arms, but she kept walking, because some things were worth the risk, even if it cost her everything. When Brennan woke and found her gone, his howl of anguish echoed through the mountains, the sound of a mate whose heart was being torn in two. And miles away, Tempest heard it through the bond and let her own tears fall, praying she'd survive long enough to make this right. The cold stone floor bit into Tempest's knees as consciousness returned in slow, agonizing waves. Her wrists burned where silver-lace chains bound them above her head, the metal searing her skin and suppressing her wolf. She tried to shift position, to ease the screaming ache in her shoulders, but the chains held her immobile. How long had she been here? Hours? Days? Time blurred in the windowless cell, marked only by the rhythmic drip of water somewhere in the darkness and the persistent, gnawing terror that clawed at her chest. The baby kicked weakly against her ribs, and Tempest sent a silent prayer of gratitude to the moon goddess. Still alive, still fighting, she'd endure anything as long as her child survived. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, and Tempest forced her head up, refusing to cower. The door scraped open, revealing Marcus's familiar silhouette backlit by torchlight. Still defiant, he observed, his tone almost admiring as he stepped into the cell. "I always hated that about you. That stubborn pride that made you think you were worth something." "Where's my sister?" Tempest's voice came out hoarse but steady. "You promised if I came willingly." "Your sister is alive. For now." Marcus crouched before her, studying her face with cold calculation. "Whether she stays that way depends entirely on you, my dear rejected mate." The title stung, but Tempest refused to flinch. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted." His hand shot out, gripping her chin hard enough to bruise. "Control. You were supposed to be a proper, obedient mate. Instead, you questioned me, challenged me, made me look weak in front of my pack." His fingers tightened. "And then you had the audacity to run to the Alpha King himself. You rejected me," Tempest spat. "You cast me out. What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to die in those woods." Marcus's smile was cruel. "That was the plan, you see. Reject you publicly so no one would question your death. Let the elements claim you and the bastard you carried. But you survived. You always were harder to kill than you looked." Tempest's blood ran cold. "You wanted me dead? Why? Because of the prophecy, you stupid girl." He released her chin with a shove that sent pain lancing through her neck. "A child born of betrayal will unite the kingdoms. Do you have any idea what that means? The power that child represents?" "So you rejected me to create the conditions of the prophecy," Tempest whispered, understanding dawning like ice water through her veins. "You wanted to control my child from the beginning." "I wanted to be the father of the prophesied heir," Marcus corrected, "the kingmaker. But you ruined that when you let Brennan claim you both." Rage flickered across his features. "Now the child will unite the kingdoms under his rule, not mine." "You're insane." "I'm ambitious." He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his clothes. "But don't worry. Constantine has a plan to salvage this situation, one that requires you alive, for now." He left without another word, the door slamming shut and plunging her back into darkness. Tempest sagged against her chains, exhaustion and despair threatening to overwhelm her. But then she felt it. a warmth blooming in her chest, fierce and golden. The mate bond. Brennan was coming. She could feel his rage and desperation through their connection, could sense him drawing closer with every passing moment. Hold on, she told herself and the baby both. Just hold on a little longer. Brennan stood at the head of his assembled army, his eyes blazing gold as he surveyed the massive force before him. Wolves from every pack that owed him allegiance had answered his call, creating a sea of warriors that stretched across the valley. The largest military mobilization in generations, all for one purpose: to retrieve his mate. Your Majesty, Rowan said carefully from beside him, the scouts report Silver Fang has fortified their compound. A direct assault will result in heavy casualties. I don't care. Brennan's voice was barely recognizable, scraped raw with fury and fear. She's in there, suffering, weakening. His hand pressed against his chest where the mate bond pulled taut. I can feel her pain, Rowan. Every moment we wait is another moment she endures torture. I understand, but strategy can wait. Brennan turned to his beta, and Rowan took an involuntary step back from the feral intensity in his king's eyes. That's my mate, my family, and I will tear apart anyone and anything that stands between us. He shifted before Rowan could respond, his bones cracking and reforming with brutal efficiency. His wolf was massive, easily twice the size of a normal alpha, with midnight black fur and eyes that glowed with preternatural power. The assembled army shuddered at the sight of their king in his true form, reminded viscerally why he ruled them all. Brennan threw his head back and howled, the sound echoing across the valley like thunder. It was a promise and a threat, a declaration of war that made even his own wolves shiver with instinctive fear. Then he was running, a dark shadow streaking across the battlefield with his army surging behind him like a tide. The Silver Fang warriors met them at the compound's outer defenses, but they might as well have been trying to stop an avalanche. Brennan tore through their lines with savage efficiency, his jaws crushing throats and his claws rending flesh. Blood sprayed hot across his muzzle, but he barely registered it. All that mattered was the bond pulling him forward, the golden thread that connected him to Tempest growing stronger with each enemy he felled. A wolf launched at him from the side, young, terrified, barely more than a pup. Brennan caught him mid-leap and slammed him into the ground hard enough to crack ribs, but not kill. The wolf whimpered and bared his throat in submission. Brennan let him live and kept moving. Behind him, the battle raged with brutal intensity. Rowan coordinated their forces with practiced precision, but even he couldn't fully control the chaos. Wolves fought and died in the mud, the air thick with the copper scent of blood and the acrid smell of fear. But Brennan noticed something strange as he cut deeper into enemy territory. Silver Fang wolves were switching sides mid-battle, abandoning their pack to join his forces. They recognized power when they saw it, recognized that their alpha had made a fatal mistake in threatening the Alpha King's mate. The compound. Rowan's mental voice reached him through the pack link. Brennan, you're headed straight into their stronghold. It could be a trap. Brennan didn't slow. Trap or not, Tempest was in there. He could feel her now, could sense her presence like a beacon, weak but alive, terrified but unbroken. He crashed through the compound's main gate with enough force to splinter wood and bend iron, his wolf's momentum carrying him into a courtyard where Silver Fang warriors scrambled to form a defensive line. They didn't stand a chance. Brennan was a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless, driven by a mate bond that screamed at him to find his female and destroy anyone who dared to harm her. He barely remembered the kills afterward, only knew that when the courtyard finally fell silent, he was standing alone among the bodies, his chest heaving and his muzzle dripping red. And somewhere beneath his feet, through thick stone and iron, he could feel Tempest's heartbeat calling to him like a drum. The cell door crashed open again, but this time it was Constantine who entered, flanked by two massive guards. His smile was sharp as broken glass as he studied Tempest's hunched form. "I hear your mate has arrived," he said conversationally. "Making quite the mess upstairs. Very dramatic. Very inefficient. Tempest lifted her head, hope and terror warring in her chest. Brennan's here? Oh yes. Tearing through my wolves like they're made of paper. Constantine tisked softly. All that power and violence just for you. It's almost romantic. He nodded to one of the guards. Bring the sister. No. Tempest's heart seized as the guard disappeared, returning moments later dragging a girl who looked so much like the sister she remembered, but hollowed by years of captivity. Sage's eyes widened when she saw Tempest. Tempest? Her voice cracked. They said you were dead. A touching reunion, Constantine interrupted, pulling a knife from his belt. Silver blade, wickedly sharp. He pressed it against Sage's throat hard enough to draw blood. Now then, Tempest. You're going to reject your bond with Brennan. You're going to tell him you chose Marcus, that the child is better off without him. And if you don't, the knife pressed deeper. Your sister dies. Slowly. Tempest stared at the blade, at her sister's terrified face, at Constantine's cruel smile. Despair threatened to swallow her whole. After everything she'd endured, after finally finding a mate who loved her, it would all end here in this cell, with her forced to destroy the one good thing in her life. The baby kicked suddenly, sharply, as if protesting the very thought. And something inside Tempest broke. Not in surrender, in awakening. Power flooded through her veins like liquid fire, searing away the weakness and fear. Her eyes snapped open, glowing silver white with an ancient light that made Constantine stumble backward in shock. The chains holding her, silver-laced and supposedly unbreakable, cracked like glass under a sudden surge of strength that defied explanation. What? Constantine's voice faltered as Tempest rose to her feet, her body crackling with energy. She shifted. The transformation was unlike anything she'd experienced before. Where her wolf had always been small and brown, the creature that emerged was massive and silver-white, with fur that seemed to glow with its own internal light. Power radiated from her in waves that made the guards whimper and drop to their knees in instinctive submission. A silver wolf, the ancient bloodline everyone thought extinct. The pregnancy hadn't weakened her. It had awakened something dormant in her very DNA. Sage's guard released her and fled. Constantine pressed himself against the wall, his knife forgotten. And Tempest, finally gloriously free, turned her glowing eyes toward Marcus, who'd appeared in the doorway drawn by the commotion. Her former mate went pale. "That's not possible. You were always weak. You never—" Tempest launched herself at him with a snarl that shook the stone walls. They crashed into the corridor in a tangle of fur and fangs. Marcus shifted desperately, but his wolf was no match for the power coursing through Tempest's transformed body. She fought with a ferocity born of every humiliation, every cruel word, every moment she'd believed his lies about her worthlessness. She was not weak. She was not broken. She was not the helpless Omega he'd tried to make her. She was strong. She was whole. She was enough. Marcus's wolf tried to go for her throat, but Tempest caught him mid-lunge and slammed him into the floor hard enough to crack stone. Her jaws closed around his neck, not to kill, but to force submission, to make him acknowledge what he'd refused to see before. She was the one with power now. Marcus shifted back to human form beneath her, his eyes wide with fear and something that might have been regret. "Tempest, please!" She released him with a growl of disgust and shifted back herself, standing over him bloodied but unbroken. "You don't get to speak my name," she said quietly. "You lost that right when you cast me out, when you tried to kill me and my child. Our child. No." Her hand pressed to her belly, protective and fierce. "This child is mine and Brennan's. You're nothing to us. You're nothing at all." She turned away from him, done with the male who'd tried to destroy her, and found Sage staring at her with awe and tears streaming down her face. "You came for me," Sage whispered. "Always." Tempest pulled her sister into a fierce embrace despite the pain radiating through her body from the fight. "You're my family. I'll always come for you." The sound of footsteps, dozens of them, echoed through the corridor. Tempest turned, positioning herself between Sage and the approaching threat, ready to fight again despite her exhaustion. But it was Brennan who rounded the corner, still in his massive wolf form, his fur matted with blood and his eyes wild with desperate need. The moment he saw her, alive, standing, whole, he shifted back to human and crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. Tempest. Her name was a prayer and a sob as his arms came around her, pulling her against his chest with a desperation that spoke of every terrified moment he'd endured. I felt you. I'm okay. She wrapped her arms around him, breathing in his familiar scent beneath the blood and smoke. We're okay. The baby's okay. Brennan's hands moved over her frantically, checking for injuries, finding the silver burns on her wrists and the bruises on her throat. His expression went murderous. Who did this? Who hurt you? It doesn't matter now. Tempest cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. I handled it. I freed myself, Brennan. I'm not the same broken Omega who stumbled into your territory anymore. He stared at her, taking in her blood-stained clothes and the silver tint still lingering in her eyes. You shifted, he breathed, into a silver wolf. I felt it through the bond, that surge of power. The pregnancy triggered something. Tempest smiled despite her exhaustion. Our child gave me the strength to fight back, to reclaim myself. Our child, Brennan repeated, his voice rough with emotion. Then he was kissing her, desperate and fierce, pouring 3 days of terror and rage and relief into the press of his lips against hers. When they finally broke apart, Rowan appeared behind Brennan with a contingent of guards. His eyes widened when he saw the carnage Tempest had wrought single-handedly. By the goddess. You took down Marcus and his guards alone? Not alone. Tempest's hand rested on her belly. I had help. A scream of rage echoed from deeper in the compound, inhuman and twisted, laced with dark power that made every wolf present flinch with instinctive revulsion. Constantine. And from the feel of that power, he wasn't done fighting. Brennan's arms tightened around Tempest protectively. Get her out of here, he ordered Rowan. Take her somewhere safe while I... No. Tempest pulled back to look at him, her jaw set with determination. We finish this together. That's what mates do. You've been through enough. And I'm still standing. She met his eyes steadily. I'm not running anymore, Brennan. Not from this. Not from anything. We end this threat. Together. For a moment, she thought he might argue. But then something shifted in his expression, pride and love and fierce admiration. He saw her not as the broken Omega who needed his protection, but as his equal, his partner, his mate in truth. Together, he agreed, taking her hand in his. They walked out of the compound side by side, emerging into a courtyard where Constantine stood wreathed in shadows that moved with unnatural life. Dark magic crackled around him, and his eyes had gone completely black. No whites, no iris, just endless darkness. Fools, he hissed, his voice layered with something that wasn't entirely his own. Did you think I relied on mere wolves to achieve my aims? The ancient powers whispered the prophecy to me years ago. A child born of betrayal will unite the kingdoms, or tear them apart in war. I've spent decades ensuring the latter outcome. Why? Tempest demanded. What do you gain from war? Power feeds on chaos and bloodshed. Constantine's smile was terrible. And I've made bargains with forces older than your goddess. When the kingdoms burn, when wolves turn on wolves in fear and rage, that's when my masters will rise. The shadows around him coalesced into tangible forms, twisted creatures that looked like wolves but wrong, corrupted by dark magic. They snarled with mouths full of too many teeth, their eyes glowing sickly green. Last chance, Constantine said. Give me the child willingly, and I'll grant you both quick deaths. Brennan's answering growl was pure alpha dominance. You'll have to go through me first. And me, Tempest added, her own wolf rising to the surface, silver light beginning to glow around her. Constantine laughed. How touching! Very well. Let's see if your mate bond is strong enough to survive the void. He attacked with the shadow creatures surging forward like a wave of darkness. Brennan shifted instantly, his massive black wolf launching to meet them. Tempest followed, her silver form blazing like a beacon against the corrupted magic. They fought as one, their movements synchronized through the mate bond in a way that transcended conscious thought. When Brennan lunged left, Tempest covered his right. When she faltered from exhaustion, he was there, his strength bolstering hers through their connection. The courtyard became a battlefield of light and shadow, the mate bond between them creating a visible golden aura that the darkness couldn't penetrate. Other wolves, Brennan's forces, and even some former Silver Fang warriors, formed a circle around them, bearing witness to something unprecedented. Two mates fighting as one. Power and love merged into something transcendent. But Tempest could feel her strength waning. The transformation, the captivity, the pregnancy, it was all catching up to her. She stumbled, and Constantine seized the opportunity, darkness coalescing into a spear aimed directly at her swollen belly. No! Brennan's roar shook the earth as he threw himself between Tempest and the attack. But before the dark magic could strike either of them, light exploded from Tempest's womb, pure and brilliant and ancient. The baby, their child glowing from within her body, radiating power that drove back the shadows like dawn banishing night. The mate bond flared in response, gold and silver light intertwining as Brennan's protective instinct merged with Tempest's love. The combined force created a shockwave that slammed into Constantine with the weight of destiny itself. The dark magic shattered, the shadow creatures dissolved, and Constantine, corrupted by forces he couldn't control, was purified in an instant that looked almost gentle. The darkness bled from his eyes, leaving behind a broken man who collapsed to his knees with a sob of relief. "It's gone," he gasped. The whispers, the hunger, "it's gone." But Tempest barely heard him. She staggered, the sudden absence of power leaving her hollowed and weak. Brennan caught her before she could fall, cradling her against his chest as he shifted back to human. "I've got you," he murmured, his hand pressed protectively over where their child rested. "You're safe now. You're both safe." Around them, wolves from every pack present dropped to their knees, not in submission, but in reverence. They'd just witnessed the prophecy's true meaning, not a child who would unite through conquest or bloodshed, but through being the living embodiment of what the mate bond could overcome. A symbol of love and acceptance, triumphing over rejection and hatred. Dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Tempest looked up at Brennan through exhausted eyes and saw tears streaming down his face. "We did it," she whispered. "We saved everyone." "You saved everyone," he corrected. "You and our child. You're both so much stronger than you ever knew." Rowan approached carefully, his expression awed. "Your Majesties, the Silver Fang Pack has surrendered. They're requesting to join the Alliance under your rule." Other voices joined his, representatives from the packs that had fought with them, all pledging loyalty not just to the Alpha King, but to his queen as well. Tempest tried to process it all, but exhaustion dragged at her like an anchor. "Later," Brennan said firmly, his arms tightening around her. "My mate needs rest and healing. Everything else can wait." He lifted her easily despite her protest and began walking toward where his forces had set up a medical tent. Behind them, wolves worked to tend the wounded and secure the compound. The battle was over, the war was won, and Tempest, once rejected and left to die, had become the queen who'd helped save them all. As Brennan laid her gently on a cot, and the healers swarmed to check on her and the baby, Tempest caught his hand and held tight. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Brennan's answering smile was radiant despite his blood-stained appearance. Never, he promised. I'll never give up on us. That's what mates do. And as Tempest finally let herself drift into healing sleep, she felt the baby kick contentedly within her womb, a gentle reminder that sometimes the greatest power came not from strength or magic, but from choosing love over fear, unity over division, and hope over despair. The prophecy was fulfilled. The kingdoms would unite, and their family, born of rejection but claimed by love, would lead them into a new era of peace.